More than a decade ago, a decentralized group of international activist hackers, collectively known as Anonymous, made their way into global headlines for several high-profile hacks and pranks. One prominent member of that self-selecting band of disruptors is now Anonymous No More, with a documentary airing tonight on TVO. He is known as Commander X, and he's a human rights and information activist. He joins us tonight from Mexico City, Mexico. Also with us is Ian Thornton. He is a novelist and co-producer of that TVO original documentary called The Face of Anonymous, which has its world broadcast premiere right after this conversation. Ian is in Dunchurch, Ontario, just northeast of Parry Sound. And it's a pleasure to have both you gentlemen with us tonight here on TVO. I guess it makes start just before we start our conversation to show a short snippet of the trailer to whet the appetite of our viewers to the documentary that will come later. So let's do that now.
This document alleges that I am the notorious hacker activist known to the world as Commander X. I am Commander X.
Why did he say that?
You try to tell him to shut up. See how that works.
He told me that he was a cyber warlord.
One of the most notorious hackers online.
I've been called cyber terrorist.
His alias is Commander X. He says that Anonymous may very well be the most powerful organization on Earth.
I was Batman. I had powers.
Anonymous promised an army would bring unprecedented chaos. The internet is coming for you. Get ready.
What are they after? What damage could they do?
Well, let's start with this. I know everyone calls you Commander X, but the name you were born with was Christopher. So let me ask you, what do you want me to call you?
Oh, I'm comfortable with X is good. I mean, the commander's kind of pretentious, right?
Okay,
but I mean,
X
that's what the movie's about a persona, first and foremost, and that persona has a name. So yeah, X is good.
X it is then. How did you become a hacktivist in the first place, X?
I think, I was drawn to the power of hacktivism. I was drawn to it as an activist. I think in the movie, Greg House summed it up. I was first and foremost, as he put it, a hippie activist. And I was picking up anything, throughout my life, throughout my career of trying to make a difference in this world, was picking up any tool really that was effective. Hacktivism, in my opinion, is probably one of the most effective tools of activism in modern times, maybe arguably in human history.
We should just say, for people who are hearing some noise in the background there, do you want to explain your circumstances right now?
Well, then if we're going to do that, we might as well show off. I mean, so yeah, I've got issues, right? And there's nowhere to put them. So I'm sorry. I'm doing the best I can.
No need to apologize. We've had plenty of pets and kids and spouses and everything else on this program making cameos, so that's just consistent.
Well, let's be clear while we got a moment to do a plug for adoption. These are both Mexican street rescues, so don't buy an animal. Rescue your animals. Rescue as many as you can. I got two. That's a bit most I can handle. So
Gotcha.
They're like my
Thanks
kids. They're like my kids. Yeah.
Ian, let me move to you and ask what you saw as your role in trying to tell X's story.
Well, it started off very innocently, and I was walking down the street in Toronto in May 2016, pushing two children down the street in a little stroller, and there was a character on the steps of the Ukrainian church reading a very thick novel and had his cowboy hat out. He was panhandling, and I just recently had my first novel published, so I felt some kind of kindredship with him, I guess. And I dropped $2 into a cowboy hat, and little did I know that I was about to fall into the quicksand of cyber terrorism, cyber warlordship, spies, espionage, paranoia, and a journey that continues to this day. He looked up. He had a very interesting and intriguing countenance, and we hit it off straight away. And it was 6 weeks before he actually told me who he was, who he is. And it was the day after the Brexit vote. I should backtrack. In the meantime, I had shared my novel with him, and he realized that I wasn't a Fed, and there was no chance or little chance of being renditioned from the church steps or from the park where he slept, and where he slept for much of 7 years whilst in Canada. So I guess he started to trust me, and then the day after the Brexit vote, he was very energized, and I asked him why. He said, well, this is good news for Julian. Julian who? Well, Assange. Okay, well, why is that so interesting to you? And he told me that he's communicated with him on a regular basis, and that he was himself a cyber warlord, and told me a long and expansive story, which naturally I doubted. And I thought, well, do we have a Fisher King type character here? Which I found just as intriguing and just as charming and just as beautiful as what could be the possible truth. But when he told me to go home and search in the New Yorker from September 2014, an article, a 25-page feature by David Kushner called "The Masked Avengers," that this was he, and so I did that. And as I read through it, there were physical descriptions, which sounded like it could be him, but there were no pictures. So I cross-referenced the name that was in the article, X's real name, Christopher Mark Doyon, and up popped a mugshot from when he was arrested in Santa Cruz, California. And that's when the penny dropped, and I get goosebumps when I tell that story to this day. The guy in the park, the guy sleeping under the tree in front of the old people's home, was the guy who helped to bring down Mubarak in Egypt and Ben Ali in Tunisia, and helped to propel Black Lives Matter into the consciousness.
Well, let's tell a bit more of that story if we can. I want to go back to X and tell a bit more of that story now, because X, you have lived on the streets for much of your life, and you have certainly over the course of your hacktivism career learned to be very mistrustful of a lot of people. So I wonder how you came to trust Ian to tell your story.
Well, Ian was not the first and not the last to have me reveal myself to them. A lot of people ask why. That's really like a more pertinent question. Why would I do something like that? Why would I take the risk? And the simple matter was, I'm not this huge, rich, famous activist. I needed help. I needed people to form a chain of social assistance to a dissident on the run from a repressive regime. And that effort was, ongoing all the time. It was a matter of judgment. It was a matter of sizing somebody up as quickly as you can, sizing up their character, sizing up whether or not, of course, they're involved with law enforcement or any kind of thing like that. And then just hoping for the best, then kind of throwing the dice and saying, well, I've done the best I can to check this person out, befriend this person, and then open myself up to them. Ian was unique in that most people that I do that with don't become this deep, lasting friendship. It is more of a case of, hey, I need you to do the right thing now. I need you to help me out. Will you do that? And so that's sort of where the why of it comes from. I hope.
And have you seen the documentary, X?
I have seen it exactly once, yeah.
And what'd you think of it?
I think it's very entertaining. First of all, it's a very lighthearted look at myself and my life in the given format of, whatever 90 odd minutes. You can't really explain or even begin to scratch the surface of what the story is and what was done by myself and others. But and I think also, Gary's been very clear that he was, tried to be an objective eye. So it's not hagiographic. It's not the kind of stories that maybe I would have chosen to put in there and the kind of people I would have chosen to put in there. But I approved of it. I cooperated with it. It's certainly very excited for Gary and Ed and Ian on this project, for them to have a lot of people watch it, and hopefully, like I said, I think at the very least you'll be entertained. It'll make you smile, hopefully make you think a little bit. Yeah, I think it's a good movie. I think people should watch it.
Well, I have watched it, and I agree with you. It's a very good movie and tells a terrific story. Ian, for those who don't know, because we shouldn't assume everyone does, tell us what Anonymous is.
Oh well, I really should defer to the master on the other side of the screen. But as far as I was concerned, it was something that in the small amounts that I'd witnessed it at that time was a body that was a very flat and decentralized body that was fighting for justice and seemed to be sticking up for the little guy, and I guess that's what appealed to the whole narrative to me. I'm a novelist, a nosy novelist, so I sensed a wonderful story here. I should preface that by saying it was friendship first and friendship last, and friendship the thread that bound it all together. But in sensing that story, it was at the time when there was a sense that Trump might come to power. X certainly predicted in his prescience that Trump would come to power, and that Jared Kushner would be pivotal, and there'd be mischief and subterfuge. But I have two young children, and I guess the romantic in me wanted to sit in front of a post-apocalyptic hearth or fireplace one day and say to the kids, I did do something in the war. Not that I'm wishing a post-apocalyptic future, of course, but that I was doing something that made a sliver of a difference. And X and I disagree on some politics, but I think what we both agree on is that there is a lack of justice in the world, and I guess that's what really appealed to me, and what I saw in Anonymous. I've learned a lot more about them since, and that it's a myriad of opinions and a myriad of individuals, and the most loosely knit community one could imagine.
Well, let's go back
originally
to
for
X.
me, it was justice.
Sure. Let's go back to X now, and just because to the extent I think, X, that a lot of people know of this organization, they certainly know about the Guy Fawkes masks that everybody has taken to wearing, and that became really the signature calling card of this organization, such as it is, over the years. There you go.
You mean this one?
Do you want to give us the short story on how the mask became the identity of Anonymous?
It was convenient at the time when Anonymous, for the early part of its history, was a purely cyber movement. The idea of Anons even being in the streets had never been even conceived of, and then that changed. And in maybe 2008, 2009, when Anons began to take to the streets. And of course, now you can look at a video from any protests that we all know in media are going on at this very moment: Colombia, Palestine, Myanmar. And I guarantee you, if you look at shots today, right now, this very moment, live shots from any of those street protests, if you look long enough, you'll see somebody wearing one of those masks. So it really grew from something, but it was a matter of necessity to cover our faces when we did hit the streets. And the Guy Fawkes mask, V for Vendetta, had just come out as a movie. It was a mask where you could call a costume shop in almost any major city in America at that time and get it. It could have just as well been some other stupid, iconic sort of movie-based mask. So
right.
I think a matter of coincidence. It was just really neat. It was the one really neat coincidence, I guess, or whatever the synchronicity is, that the V for Vendetta movie does tend to line up with the way that scene at the very end when all the Anons, people in masks, sort of converge on Trafalgar Square. That is very much the way Anonymous sees itself. So
now let me ask you about one of the jobs that you were involved in, the hacking of the government in Santa Cruz County, the website. Maybe you could explain for people why you felt it was important to do that.
Well, it's still very important to fight the very same cause. It's been going on for 30 years now. I've used various names for it. You can call it class warfare. You can call it a class pogrom. Um, I think it's a war of class extinction, really, in Santa Cruz, where a very oligarchic elite group of people, we later called them and Occupy the 1%, have really taken over the city. They don't want to see any bohemian people. They don't want to see any street people. They don't want to see any tents. They don't want to see anybody laying around. It's really a battle that's 30 years old. First of all, it was already old when I got involved with it. But when I became visceral for me, when I began to sleep out on the courthouse steps with these people, fighting just basic sleeping bans and bedding bans and tent bans, now that Keith McHenry, founder of Food Not Bombs, is there now still organizing the tent encampments, defending them in courts and in the streets with transgressive action. And so this is a thing that is really just a cause that, and this is happening all over the country. Let me tell you something. I live in Mexico. They don't bulldoze homeless camps down here, regardless of what you think of this country. So there's a problem, and it's going on in cities all across America. It always has been. Santa Cruz just happened to be my home. It happened to be a place where I encountered it. And what I did in the end with organizing the DDoS protest against the Santa Cruz County website was simply picking up another tool that just happened to be in my tool belt. I happened to be involved with Anonymous. It wasn't a big thing back then. It wasn't this big deal back when that happened, to be an anon or to sit in coffee houses and peck away at the world under the guise of a mask. So I was just, in my mind, it wasn't that big of a deal, really. I was picking up another tool of simple protest, a sit-in, a virtual sit-in, a cyber sit-in of the county website on behalf of people that I was living with these people by that point. I was experiencing their agony and their pain, and it was visceral for me. So
Now,
I
X,
was
you've pointed out that you're in Mexico right now, and maybe we should use this moment to explain to people why you are in fact there, as opposed to in the United States anymore. What's the story there?
Well, that's my green card, guys. On there, I have, under the Immigration Act, the status of humanitarian refugee. It says so on the card. But and that's what covers political asylum here in Mexico. I've been granted political asylum. In fact, it was granted to me instantly upon my surrender in the movie. You can actually see me walking into the INM. I was very nervous. I mean, they had every legal right to arrest me at that point, but we had done a pressure campaign, Anonymous, and my friends had pressured the Mexican government for several weeks to do the right thing. When I did surrender, they knew I was coming exactly when, and we walked in with a movie crew, which I suppose didn't help the respect level that I got from that point. But I surrendered. I was granted political asylum. You can go on Wikipedia and type in list of people who have received political asylum. I was quite proud for a while. That list began with Karl Marx and ended with me in Mexico, with Evo Morales, the president of Bolivia, a close second, both of those being from Mexico. Now there's a kid from the UK, from Hong Kong, who fled to the UK, and he's now last on that list. And also, I'd like to point out to Canadian viewers, I am the first U.S. citizen in history to successfully claim political asylum in Mexico, period. I mean, that's sort of significant aside from hacktivism. So.
And are you still doing hacktivism there?
No, those days are over. I do media. I have a weekly video show, live stream show that I do. X Speaks, The World Through Sunglasses. You can pretty easily find that. I guess they're going to put out just for this interview my Twitter. That's a great place to start. And I do Twitter, and that's about it, really. I mean, I have to be a good guest. There are constraints. There are, things that I have to behave now, and there are things that are to be expected of me as a good guest in this country. And I want to keep this political asylum. I need the safety. I am truly fleeing a repressive regime. And anybody who doesn't believe that has had their head in the sand and their eyes closed for the last 4 years of the last regime. So.
Well, can I ask you, X, do you have a home to live in?
Yeah, beautiful house. I'm in a gated community. I'm in a compound, first of all. You can see behind me. That's why my house is able to be made completely almost out of glass. Everything you see around me, I'm in kind of a big octagon part of the house where my office is. And, I have a wonderful yard. Both my doggies have a great yard around, and we're in a walled compound. And then all of these compounds, all of my neighbors are in similar compounds, and we're in a gated community. Thankfully, I'm very close to the front gate, so I don't have to walk very far. And there's always a security guard out there at the front gate to
Gotcha.
control entry. So it's a gated community and very safe, south of Mexico City.
May I just
Okay.
add something there, please, Steve?
Please, Ian.
There's something that will stay with me forever to my dying day, and that is when X was instrumental in bringing down the murderers of Tunisia and Egypt in their gold palaces, Ben Ali and Mubarak. He was sleeping in vicious circumstances in a Canadian winter, and succeeded in his task. And if one fast forwards a couple of years, Ben Ali dies in exile and is buried in Saudi soil, and Mubarak dies in prison. And as this news is breaking, X is swinging in a hammock in Mexico, sipping on a margarita with two faithful dogs next to him. And that just makes me smile.
Well, let me ask you, on the other hand, if there have been any repercussions, political or otherwise, to you, Ian, for either telling this story or helping X along the way.
No, there hasn't. And I, as I explained, when I first knew him, he was a friend in the park. He was a homeless man. And then when he revealed himself to me, I saw a very prominent lawyer in Toronto, and explained the situation to him, and that the next step would likely be a journalistic one, and that's when I took the project to first of all to Vice, and they were not a good fit. They didn't respect that a man's life was on the line. And I have a background in international television, so I made a couple of calls, and within a couple of weeks, I had Werner Herzog on board to direct. And then when we lost Werner, he went off to Moscow to make the Gorbachev film. And it has to be said that there was a prominent SVOD streamer who turned this down with Werner Herzog on board and didn't have the courage to do it, but TVO did. And that should be recognized as well. So thank you to TVO. So it was during that time that I realized I had journalistic cover, and I was telling a story. He hadn't committed a crime in Canada as far as I was concerned, and that was key. Then we proceeded with the film, and I think that's all justified by the fact that Mexico have now done what they have done. But sure, it was a strange and sometimes worrying time, but I got good advice.
Gotcha. X, I wonder whether you have any persisting relationship with Anonymous at this stage.
Well, I have never, first of all, had so many people who today want to make a living off of their former association with Anonymous. I've never disavowed my association with Anonymous. I am still an integral part of Anonymous is in my heart, and I'm still part of Anonymous. Every day I do the best I can on Twitter and with my live show and my archive shows on YouTube to shine light on all the good work that my brothers and sisters are still doing out there who are wearing the mask. Am I going out in the streets wearing a mask? Am I going online and doing cyber protests? No, but I am using this 15 minutes of fame to try to shine as much light on the work of my brother and sister Anons out there. And I still consider myself fully a part of the movement. I'm simply constricted by, like I said, simple courtesy of being in another country and being liable to that hospitality and that protection. So.
And does it bother you that you yourself are really not anonymous anymore?
Well, yeah, but that's not my fault. That was never my intention. And then the anonymity that the FBI stripped me from when they arrested me in Mountain View, and I held the press conference that is in the trailer where, you know, I proclaimed that I am in fact Commander X, is because they had accused me of being so in the indictment, and that I felt was necessary for other reasons. But when I did that and proclaimed myself, it was they had stripped me of an anonymity that was used not to hide any kind of what I considered criminal activity in the United States of America or the West. It was to protect me from, we had already had by then Iranian death squads after me, for instance, who had threatened me and put fatwas out on me because of our work in the Green Revolution in Iran. By then, we were literally networking all over the world, and being a persona in that made me a target. My anonymity as a protester online allowed me to confront these dictatorial regimes and these powers that be, and be safe and protected. And what the FBI did, my government should have been protecting me for the good work I was doing at that point. And instead, they stripped me and left me naked to the winds of my identity. And from there, I did what I had to do after that. But it was not my choice to become unmasked. I would still be masked if I had my way to this day. So.
I appreciate that, X. It does raise the question, though, of whether someday you actually hope to return to U.S. soil. What do you think?
I have offered to do so on a number of occasions. I have some knowledge that I think the whole Western world would enjoy being revealed to them, and it has to do with, tangential to this interview, elections and things like that. I have made a standing offer that I will testify to Congress and debrief the President of the United States personally on certain things that I feel comfortable revealing to them. In exchange for immunity of my testimony, I would have to admit to certain crimes. In addition, I need to return to U.S. soil to do that, and I want a full pardon from all, from everything, and I would return home. Under those conditions, I think it would be good for America. I think there's no reason for intellectuals and authors and protesters like myself to have to flee the United States. The United States is supposed to be the bastion of freedom. It's supposed to be a place where we're all free to exercise ideas, even if they're transgressive and uncomfortable ideas. We're supposed to be able to do that. I'll come home. I'll call a truce on this great war that seems to have evolved between the U.S. and Anonymous, and I'll even debrief the American public and Congress on some things that I think are, good information for the public to understand about what's going on in cyberspace today, and especially how that relates to your elections. So it's a standing offer. Sure, I would go home. I think that's ever going to happen? To be honest with you, I will tell you the truth. I think the last hope for something crazy and out of the box like that happening left when Donald Trump left on Inauguration Day. I don't think that the Democratic regime, Obama locked up more whistleblowers, more hacktivists, and combined than all other presidents combined before him. That's a fact. That's a numerical fact. That he locked up more of us than all presidents before him combined. The Democrats are not our friends. They never have been. I'm not saying that the Republicans are necessarily the greatest people to have in power, but this is not a political issue from my standpoint. This is, how do I keep myself and my people free? How do I keep other Anons out of harm's way? How do I educate them on what is the best way forward when the jackbooted thugs kick in your door and take your computer and haul you in your pajamas in the middle of the night because you got online and did some kind of protest? So that my ideas of politics, I think, are different than other people's, because I'm facing the direct point of the spear of American law enforcement and intelligence as far as, what their ideas are about what's acceptable political discourse.
Well, X and Ian, I want to thank both of you for coming onto our program tonight. And I say we should probably cut off our conversation now, because I don't think we want to delay having our viewers watch the real thing now. So we're grateful for your participation in this program. And we want to remind everybody that right after this program, immediately thereafter, you can catch the documentary, The Face of Anonymous, right here on TVO, or you can watch it anytime you like on our website, tvo.org/documentaries. Also, you can hear the director of the documentary, Gary Lang, in conversation with Colin Ellis on TVO's On Docs podcast, and that's also available on our website, tvo.org.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.